Call the Finance Committee to order at 6:30.
Something else, thank you.
Sitting on this committee are Councilor Reynolds and Councilor Cobus as the vice chair. Tonight we have guests, so I'll turn it over to you. Please introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
Thank you. So, my name is Deb Gould. I'm the city auditor here, and
My name is Mason Lord. I'm the Director of Budget Administration.
so thank you for the opportunity to come before the council. As you know, we work together on the budget, and it's typically what happens in my position as city auditor. I send out, after the books are closed, I typically send out a balance sheet summary page sometime in the month of October, and subsequent to that, typically all the members of the council as well as administrative staff that are related to the particular thing will all receive a notice from the Department of Revenue saying this is what your certified free cash is. So within my summary memo, I typically kind of hit the highlights of what is a contributing factor of why the free cash number is what it is. So I think it's fair to start with, I don't have your free cash number for you today, but you're gonna be able to, I think, kind of come up with and discern a ballpark number of what the Department of Revenue is going to be in the vicinity of from our conversation. And the number is pretty significant. So obviously when the number's big, I go backwards and I look to say, well, what are the contributing factors to that? So even though it's more complicated than this, the basic premise of free cash is you take your balance from last year, you add to it excess revenues, and whatever you don't spend on the expense side, right? Because every time we present a budget, our budget is in balance. Your revenues and expenditures equal each other. So if you didn't spend everything that was budgeted on the expense side, sort of in theory, the turnbacks, which we cut in sort of our common vernacular in the municipal finance world, is going to be contributing to the free cash. Really, it's because your expenses are smaller, right? So the net difference between the excess revenue, or all revenue received, and the difference between your revenue and your expenses is sort of like your net profit, right? Not really here, we don't really have profit, but you can kind of get the concept. So we do analysis of a couple of things. Obviously, we want to know how we ended the year and why. And then as part of the budget process, we've already presented to the budget in the spring, to the counselor in the spring, what the revenue anticipations were and what numbers look like. So we're also going to talk a little bit about the revenues, how we ended fiscal 23. And I did also do a spreadsheet on 24 so people could kind of have a concept of why we made some of the selections that we did back in April and why we still think that they're reasonable to have, right? So I think one of the things that's also important to the conversation is part of the reason I'm here tonight instead of just doing the memo is it became apparent to me throughout the process that maybe talking to people about it a little bit is a little bit more useful and helpful, particularly to the public. And the mayor's One City, One Budget Committee has met multiple times, and working with the colleagues from the school department in particular, they've said, you know, they're citizens here in Attleboro, some of them, and obviously have said, you know what, it would be really nice to know what that means, right? So if they don't, some of them obviously get the same memo that you do because they're part of the recipients of the free cash packet submission. But if they're saying it would be useful to them, we sort of figured it would be useful to everybody. So here I sit. And Mason got to join me because in large part, some of this will be him going forward, right? So it has been a collaboration. So the first spreadsheet that you're gonna get is representative of fiscal 23 expenditures. And it's just a summary by department, and what I did was basically condense the original budget transfers, which transfers typically are transfers from another available source within the budget, which would net zero. But really, if there's increases to the budget, it's either a supplemental appropriation or it is it's an appropriation from another available source, typically free cash going into the budget, right? So your revised budget is ultimately where you ended the year, and then the year-to-date expenditure column, which includes encumbrances, is what happens for all the expenses for the year and the encumbrances at year end. So an encumbrance may be not actually paid, but it would be a purchase order at year end for a contractual liability and obligation of the city. So the last column of numbers, where it says available budget, if you go all the way down to the bottom number, because that's the number everybody wants to care about first, right? Is how much money did we have in turnbacks? It's just over $5 million. So then if you were to go through every single grouping, so to speak, you're gonna see some big numbers, right? So we can do this however you want, Councilor Conti. If you wanted to go through all of them, we certainly could. But, you know, the council's budget, you have some line items within your budget that weren't used. So of the total budget that you had of $162,485.59, at the end of fiscal '23, $8,468 of that remained unspent, right? So you use 95% of your budget. If you would continue down in the margin, I kind of put comments, which are items related to the FY '23 budget and why it's available. So we all know there was a change in administration. So if there was a change in the mayors and there's difference in salaries or gaps in salaries, if there's people in the office that change positions or there was change in personnel for custodial staff, that's why you'd have that's why you'd have unused salary money in that department. And we also had an increase in the budget for the city solicitor line item throughout the year. We thought we were gonna need all of it. We didn't ultimately need all of it, so about $40,000 remained unspent in that. The very next one is a big number, right? That number is $1.7 million. The largest share of the unspent citywide budget from fiscal '23 is the $850,000 cannabis reserve that we were not allowed to use, right? We knew that we weren't going to get, I shouldn't say we weren't allowed to use it. We didn't have the revenue expectation on the other side because there's all sorts of stuff going on with the cannabis impact fee. So if we had used it and then the money never materialized on the other side, certainly this number wouldn't be as large, but the revenue side also is going to show that that never came in. The cannabis impact fee, the total collections in fiscal '23 are on the order of $12,000, no any $850,000. So there's some legal things happening throughout the Commonwealth as it relates to the host agreements. Mm-hmm. So that's outside, that's really kind of outside of my purview. I know there was some things that were happening last week at the legislature, or were supposed to be happening at the legislature last week. I don't know if they came to fruition. We have started to look into that. So that's the biggest part, right? We had the budget, we didn't spend it, it's available. It looks like it's a huge number. In addition to that, there was the opioid reserve is also in that classification. You may recall during the budget process, we actually used $150,000 of the $413,000 in reserve. We reclassified it on the balance sheet, and you appropriated that money into part of the police department's professional service grouping, and then I believe last week you just approved the two positions to go on the compensation plan, which would be funded through that money. So there will be future adjustments to, hey, we need to reallocate that 150 from where we had it in the '24 budget to a different account. But again, I bring your attention to that because that's 400,000 of the 1.7 million. So right there you have 850 and 400 of things that are not going to be recurring throughout the budget going forward. You can see within that grouping, there's some other things. You know, there was some significant savings on the utilities in some budgets through 2023. I think in large part because we had a relatively mild winter. You know, you didn't use all of the money in those accounts. We had the special events line. Insurance is $92,000 of surplus, $61,000 of unused reserve fund for transfer. So those numbers don't equal the 1.7, but it gives you kind of an idea of what the biggest numbers were of why there's turnbacks in that grouping. If you continued through, and I'm happy to kind of talk about anything that you guys wanted to say, hey, can you talk specifically about that particular number? But some of the bigger numbers that I think warrant absolute, at least to touch on, right? In the overall budget for personnel, there was $654,000 left. 512 of that is in the insurance grouping, within the same departmental budget, but specific to insurance, right? Contributions that the city makes on behalf of employees to the self-insured trust fund, or they make those to direct pays for folks who are on Senior Managed Blue or the PDP for the health insurance. The way that, I just need you to understand, the way I budgeted for '24 in that grouping, and the way they had budgeted previous in the last few years is dramatically different. So I went to the personnel office and said, can you give me, after open enrollment, give me your open enrollment figures? And I budgeted to the actuals of the budget. You might remember we talked about that in the spring, and we added a number of plans at the most expensive family plan. I think it was 15. So it appears as though in the previous budget, which this is of, they had taken the number that was there in '22 and then added the percentage of the increase in the health insurance lines, right? So the approach is dramatically different. We should not have a large excess in '24. The approach is completely different. The only way you'd have a huge excess is if we had a number of positions that went vacant, unfilled, and no retirees. Because if you recall, when somebody retires and they're eligible for health insurance through the Attleboro Contributory Retirement System, which on our side of the budget is everybody except for teachers, so even custodial staff at the school, ILAs, paraprofessionals, everybody ends up on this budget. If you have one person that retires and that position is backfilled, you're going to need an increase in this budget in 2024. So the personnel office is mindful of that, and they're tracking on a quarterly basis if you had people who left the plan or if you had a qualifying event and the plan went up. So I bring your attention to that number here because it looks really big, right? And if that's a trend, we would have to look at that. I don't expect the number to be as large next year in that category either. There's some unknowns, right? If you look at the fire department, which had a total of $224,759 left over, and if you look at the police department, that was the police number, and fire is on the order of $384,000. Most of that money, even though there's some small bits that are in other categories, most of that money is related to changes in personnel, gaps in vacancies in the department. So if you have a gap for a prolonged period of time, the salary number tends to add up. That's also the really big number as it relates to public works. About $180,000 of that $323,000 turnback is related to at least 2 rolling vacancies in the department for the entire year. Yes, sir.
So the overtime is still included in that final number?
In which one, sir?
Well, in the year-to-date expenditures.
For public works?
For fire and police.
Yes. General government only.
So the vacancies were not absorbed by overtime because we have this left over.
So vacancies, you pay out more in overtime when you have the salary vacancies. So I looked at the snapshot of all the 5-1, which is the personnel category, right? So if I looked at the fire department, and I can get you more detailed information, I'm happy to send it to you. Some of it certainly is related to that. One of the other things specifically in fire, tuition, education, and training by contract, they are entitled to, I think it's 4 classes per year for a firefighter that's enrolled in a degree program. And at the beginning of the year, the chief has to set aside and obligate, and if you're attending a class that's $500, he has to set $200 aside, and then if the folks don't use it throughout the year, it gets freed up. But a lot of times he doesn't know that till very close to the end of the year. So I want to say, and I think the number in that one line is about $103,000 of the 384.
So the question was that if we had changes in personnel and we had vacancies, it sparked overtime to be able to backfill, and yet we still came up with a surplus.
Overall in the department.
Overall in the department,
Right,
under
so
the personnel line item.
That $384,000 is not just personnel. The majority of it, I would say,
That's the
is
entire
personnel.
budget.
That's the entire budget,
Okay.
yes. The only thing that you'll see, if you look below the 384, you'll see small amounts. We carved out South Attleboro Fire, Briggs, and Twin Village on some supply lines. Because the way that the chief, I believe, had folks managing that, you might be responsible for it, Counselor, in Briggs Corner, and somebody else would be in Twin Village, so it was a mechanism to break up the budget and make sure 2 people weren't using the same pie. But that 384 is the entire fire department budget, with the exception of the small pieces that were broken out to other departments. Protective services, you can see like most of it, the Public Works had at least two. So of the 323,000, about 180,000 of it is salaries, the salary grouping. About 75,000 of it is fuel. So there was about $75,000 of unexpected fuel in the budget at the end of the year. Snow and ice, we funded that completely last year from available sources. And then you can see the rest of them. One of the other ones that, it's not a large amount of money, but on a percentage basis, it's significant. Highland Park was budgeted at $29,500 and only spent $8,644. That's directly related to the sprinkler system being shut down, which if you don't have to have a sprinkler system, you don't have to heat the building, right? So if you don't have to heat the building, you're not spending all the cost on the fuel to heat the building. And they, it's my understanding that the fire chief allowed them to have an alarm box put in instead, which is much more cost effective. The budget in fiscal '24, I think, is on the order of $10,600 or so. So that, you know, that's reflected in the budget that you approved in the spring. The other really big number that on a percentage basis and is kind of interesting is the state assessments. The state assessments were budgeted at $6.4 million, but they only charged us, they being the state, only charged us $5.5 million, an $878,000 surplus in the budget, so to speak. We budgeted for it and it was never charged. The majority of that number, $965,000, is related to charter school. So the charter school assessment, which comes out monthly, adjusted mid-year. In December, it started to trend differently. And then the last month of the fiscal year, June, was substantially smaller. I did reach out directly to the Department of Revenue and I said, you know, is there anything that can be done? And basically the answer is no. Charter school enrollment figures are driven by reports from the charter schools. And those on a rolling basis might adjust, but it's not something that we would get the benefit of in the year. In some cases, it's going to go the other direction, right? And it would adversely affect how much free cash you have at the end of the year. Ideally, right, you would have been able to cut this budget in assessments and maybe give the money to the school. You couldn't do that during the year. One of the things they said to me, you could just as easily have gotten a huge charge in June as, you know, a reduction in the charge. I don't know necessarily how that would really work in the enrollment process with schools, but that was the explanation from the state. That, I'm going to springboard just for a second, that also affects the revenue side. It doesn't affect just this side. So that it's not a windfall of 985, there's a net number to that. And you can see, like, we were overcharged, so to speak, for the school choice. That number was $103,000 more than what was on the assessment page. If you go right above the yellow line, which is the school's budget that the school gets on their side of the budget, right? So that's the $90,463,000 with additional appropriations given to them in the year. They ended up at $91,153,000. Their total expenses of $90,751,000. Their overall turnbacks, excuse me, for fiscal '23 of $401,965. I broke that out below in a little block for you. The ineligibles are, it's a capital line for them. In addition to a capital line, it's a transportation line. School transportation, ultimately, that would flow back through to the city regardless of anything. We met our obligations, budgetary and otherwise, in fiscal '23 for net school spending. So in the strictest technical sense, the school department isn't guaranteed that that $388,000 back to them. Historically, the previous administrations and the councils have, at the mayor's request, always appropriated that money back to the school after the certification of free cash. That's been our practice here for a number of years, and I'm sure Mason will speak to it as well, but that is something that I believe Mayor DeSimone intends to do as well. So if you, does anybody have any questions about this?
And I have a question tied to that one.
Before you do, you triggered a question when you said that the school 400, I'm sorry, it's, the type is so small.
I'm sorry.
676,000 surplus in the school?
School was 401,965.91,
Okay,
all in.
I'll take that. Is not the net number, because if it's not the net number, then this is not the net number for free cash.
So this spreadsheet before you does not represent free cash in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
What this represents is how much money is unexpended on the expense side of the budget,
Right.
which is $5 million.
And the free cash is the number that's certified by the state.
Which has not yet been submitted. And one of the reasons it hasn't been submitted yet is in the calculation, so I went back and looked at last year to give you all just a little perspective, right? So last year, so the general fund is responsible for everything, right? If another fund doesn't make good on their money, or something happens, if it's in deficit and it's not an allowable deficit under the rules of the Department of Revenue, the general fund and the free cash will get automatically reduced. So last year, the deducts on free cash were in excess of $680,000.
But it was a $3.7 million free cash
It was more than
number.
that. It was nine.
More than that.
It was 9.
Okay.
It was, yeah.
Councilor Cobus, you have the
It was,
floor.
so last year's free cash, so the big numbers here, right, so as unpopular as this may sound, your goal isn't 0, right? You have to, if you budgeted exactly and everything came in exactly, and you didn't have like a conservative local receipt number on something, and you didn't make your numbers, you're gonna be in negative and not in the position to do anything, right? Put some money in reserves for capital, put some money into the stabilization fund, shore up the sped stabilization, like all of those things, right? So 0 isn't really your goal, right? It is on a budgetary basis, right? But we all know, in theory, most years, there's been one year in the city of Attleboro, I've been here since 1996. There was one year that the free cash certification was just over $7,000. It was not a fun following year. We ended up doing a recertification of free cash because we sold the property on Rice Street, which is where it was a foreclosure. If the city treasurer at the time didn't have the foreclosure property that she could sell, we would have had nothing for free cash. So I've been here when we're close to 0, it's not a lot of fun, right? So I think there's gonna be like a development of happy medium, like what should the percentage of budget be that is our goal on the conservative basis of free cash, the only thing we really can control, right, is the local receipts.
So last year, that number was 2%?
Which
The
number?
free cash percentage of the total budget.
The 22 certification compared to the 22 number?
Correct.
I'd have to go back and look, no, it's gonna be higher than that, I would
Closer
say.
to 3.
You think it's 3?
Closer
Honestly,
to
I'd
3.
have to go back and look at my final budget for 22, because I know the 22 certification, which is what was used in this year for general government, ultimately was certified at. And this is important for you guys to understand too, right? Because the total certified free cash that was certified on 10/19 was $9,260,238. Of that number, ultimately not spent by the end of the year, was $1.6 million, just over $1.6 million.
So the wheels are spinning at home as taxpayers are thinking, okay, you've wound up with 3% of free cash left over at the end of the year. Why are my taxes going up 5% a year? Why won't they go up 2% instead of 5%? Why do we have to have this? And I think you've covered it. I think you've explained it. But 9 million seems to be more than 4% of a surplus of the total budget. 4.5%.
So let's talk about revenues then, right? Because the 9 million includes revenues and the 5 million, and let's go back just for 1 minute, right? Let's go back to the 5 million. And if we just did big giant round numbers, 878,000 of it, you know, it's not 1 million, it's short of 1 million, but you're talking of the 1.7 and then 878,000, rough numbers, that's 2.5 million. That's more than, like, just about half of the 5 million for totally one-time things. Then you look at the other big number, right? Let's look at the personnel office. It's $650,000 of that number. Again, you know, now we're up over $3 million of the 5 million. And I've shared with you that the approach to budgeting was a completely different approach. I went sort of zero up, right? Tell me what you need and we'll go with that. So now of the 5 million, take 3, like we're down to 2 almost immediately. If you look at your 3 biggest departments in the city, you look at the Department of Public Works, city non-school, right? You're looking at the Department of Public Works, the fire department, and the police department, you know, you're at 8, you know, 4, 6, you're at almost $1 million right there. So the 5 million, just like that, it's gone if we're fully staffed in some of the departments. If we did I'm not gonna say better, because the approach is different, right? You know, you could be sitting here next to you saying, oh my gosh, we need all this money in the personnel office, in the health insurance accounts, because the way Deb's approach to the budget was, you know what I mean?
Deb,
So
I think that's
it's
good.
quick.
I think you've made it clearer. I want to turn the floor over to Councilor Cobus and then to Councilor Dolan.
Thank you. And so I have 4 quick questions with
Yeah.
regard to the charter school money that came back, and I'd like to try to understand that a little bit more. And so my understanding of that is that money is money that came back based on children coming and going to charters.
So just to clarify, this money hasn't come back, right? What we call a turn back basically is money that somebody had in their budget that they didn't expend. So we refer to it as a turn back, but what that is the expense wasn't as great. This normally what happens is we get billed every month as part of the distribution process of state aid. What happens is state aid sends you a net amount of money, and it's representative. Here's your money for Chapter 70, but we're taking away what you owe us for charter school. So we receive the net amount. The amount of money that they sent us in the overall aggregate and at the end on our assessment page, how much money they should have sent us bills, Counselor, for $6,437,000. They only billed us $5.5 million.
And is it assume that is because more children attended Attleboro Public Schools as opposed to attending charter schools? Would that be the assumption, or?
In theory, I would say yes, but the enrollment numbers on the other side don't change, right? So what I can tell you is it's a reduction in the number on the charter school assessment. So I can't
Okay.
say that they came
Got it.
here, right? Because I don't have those numbers yet.
Fair.
I can tell you that my limited understanding from speaking to my colleagues at the school is that our enrollment numbers are going up, but you're not going to see that. And just for clarification, my understanding of the charter school number is the charter school institution is held harmless on a rolling basis. So the charter school won't necessarily see the reduction on their side. I think they're 100, I don't know the exact percentages. I want to say it was 190, 60, it might 160, 40. So the student there, that's what they get in the first year, this is differential. Does that help at all?
It does. And so I understand that's similar to, we see changes from year to year with transportation for special education, busing and whatnot. This change, is this high or low compared to years in the past?
I've been here a long time. I've never seen, I shouldn't say never, I have no recollection of seeing the number be this dramatic on the expense side. What I also did when I talked to somebody at the state, because I was trying to figure out, is it truly indicative of the future, right? And the numbers that we were actually charged in '23 and received in '23 are closer to the estimated cherry sheets in '24. So what does that tell me? It's a one-year anomaly. Unless the enrollment numbers change again and, you know what I mean, like they're completely off. The unfortunate thing is we don't get to access the money in the middle of the year, right? Because it's the state assessment. It's not like, I'm gonna throw something up. You decided to abolish the accounting department, my office, because we didn't need it anymore. And the budget up front had so much money. In theory, right, if my department went away, you could reallocate that money through the administrative process and legislative process of the council. We can't really do that with assessment money. So it's not really money we can access. And years that we benefit from it, where they didn't charge us as much, it's going to contribute to the overall bottom line because we didn't expend that money. So it's the net, when you look at the revenue side too, because they didn't charge us certain things, when you look at both sides combined, it's on the order of about 594-ish. So
Okay.
that lends, so as part of the overall number that gets certified later, it lends itself to a conversation of, you know, do you just use it for anything or should you give it to the school, right?
Well, and that's exactly where I was going with it, was
And-
should we, based on this, would it have, if we had known this ahead of time, would it have impacted the net school spending calculation?
Yes. If you-
And then therefore, would it have impacted the resulting number that gets sent back, that in
Yes.
theory gets sent back to the school, that 388,000?
Exactly.
Um,
Now, the
And
question,
then,
yes.
should we then modify that for this one-time expense? Or this 1 year, this does sound like an anomaly, and
Right. And
So-
when you have that decision to make, do you want to give the 1 year number just to them to spend? Or do we want to put it into another type of reserve, so it's there when the rainy day comes for the school and they need money that you don't have anyplace else, right? But exactly, you got the,
But then, does this set a precedent where if things happen in the reverse, then do we
Part
do
of
the
the-
opposite?
exactly part of the conversation that we had at the one budget, one city, when we're saying, this looks like what the number is, but I can't remember the number ever being so substantial, right? And, you know, I'm not I look at all the numbers, right? But if there was a budget time where I didn't notice it, it just doesn't trigger, but I've obviously delved more into the budget side of it this year than any year in recent memory. The last time I had to do the budget was 2004. Do you know what I mean? But it's a big number. It warrants a conversation, right? Especially in a year that we may have unprecedented free cash again, right? Because nobody thought the numbers would be like this in March of 2020. And each year, we're all kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, when is it going to happen? Like, what's going on? And there's on the revenue side. So some of these numbers, I mean, we went from 5 down to 2 pretty quick, right? I mean, when you start to really pick out just the big chunks of numbers, it looks like if you saw a number and you just saw a huge number and you said, oh my goodness, what's going on? And nobody told you, or it's not mapped out well enough in a memo. That's why we're here, because we thought maybe it would be a better way to go through it. I don't know. I mean, I might regret this, but, and then on the revenue side, right, I think, does anybody have questions
That
more on the
concluded
expense
my-
side?
Questions there?
I'd like to turn the floor over to Councilor Dolan.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying the school, because I had a question regarding that. I guess I'll start, so when Councilor Conti said about, you know, people talking about their taxes, like, you know, we're hoarding money that people are paying in taxes and we have all this money left over. And I remember a year, and I don't know what year it was, but the schools had leftover money that they didn't spend. And I remember speaking to Mark Furtado about that and him saying, you try to get to zero with a $90 million budget, right? So $400,000 seems like a lot, but really with a $90 million budget, that's not a lot. So we have the city budget, but each department is almost like a little budget in itself. So it all adds up, and especially when you talk about Public Works. I mean, Public Works is down like
Right.
more than half their staff. So it might look like a windfall, but we need to fill those positions, and we need the money to fill those positions.
100%.
And now I have all these notes that I can't even read anymore. Oh, and impact fees.
Yeah.
So it was so long ago, I don't remember everything that you said, but I know that there's some legal things that you were talking about that are going on. So somewhere along the line, I feel like I heard somebody say, we need to hold on to that money in case whatever the outcome is of the legal process of what's happening with those. So is that what the 850 is? Which part of this is any part of this what we're holding on to for the result of that?
That's something I think that the council and the administration, and in fairness, again, to the folks in the administration, and Mason might want to speak to it more, that's been part of the conversation, right? That when free cash is certified, I believe, the mayor will make some requests of the council consistent with her budget message, right? We didn't fund the stabilization, and I know she wants to put money in the stabilization fund, and we need to, sorry. Do you want?
I mean,
But of that money, right, if we were gonna put money aside, it's on the order of $1.7 million.
right, so, I mean,
So, do you mind if I just, from 10,000 feet on the host agreements, and I might not get this exact, but general conversation, there is there's some schools of thought and some communities that literally gave back all the money that they had. I'm not saying anything that folks out there don't already know in this world, right? That gave back all the money that they had collected in the host community agreements, because at the beginning of the process, it's my understanding that the legislature and the way things were written allowed for the host community agreements to happen. And then sometime between that date when we did them and we're collecting money and today, there's been either some change in law that brings some of that into question, and some of it's contract law, and some of it's Massachusetts general law, and all sorts of people really frankly don't know. And there's sort of 4 different buckets. The people who are still budgeting the money and collecting it, DOR has said to us, you don't really want to do that, because if you budget it and you can't show that you collected it, you're gonna have a problem when you go to set your tax rate. There's the folks who have received money and said, you know what, we don't want to deal with this, we're just going to give it back. There's the folks, or they can't, right? The money's gone, it's spent, right? There's the folks where the money is here, or it was budgeted, and we purposely put it in a reserve here and said, you know what, we're not going to spend it until we know we collect it, because it was so up in the air, and we didn't collect it, so we never requested the transfer from the reserve. So it's sort of all up in the air. Now, as recently as last week, and I wasn't able to attend, I believe there was some discussion at the What's New in Municipal Law that there was some pending legislation that would impact what you could or couldn't do, but I'm not aware of the outcome of what that is. So right now, Counselor, to your point, if we had to return funds, it would be on the order of, I went and looked to see, $1,726,217, and that's the total cannabis impact fee amount collected in its entirety going back to the beginning. Because I have no idea what's going to happen.
so you said collected.
That money truly had been received. The $850 that we're talking about in this budget is in 2023, when the budget was presented to the council, we had an anticipated revenue amount of $850,000 on the local receipts, and we had an equal amount in a cannabis reserve in the budget, which was budgeted. This number foots on that spreadsheet, it equals your budget. So that 850 is in there. On one side, we're saying it's a turnback, right? Because it was budgeted and not expended,
Right.
right? And on the other side, it's going to reduce the overall revenue forecast, right? Because on that side, we did not collect it. We only collected $12,000 from one of the 2 entities. Does that help a little? So I don't know what's gonna happen. We could be held harmless, we could go on in the same path that we are. I don't know the answer to that. So if somebody said to me, what do you think we should do today, not knowing everything and not knowing what we would be obligated to pay back, it's the only unknown liability that I don't know what we'd do. Like, so it's $1.7 million.
Thank you. Let me see. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Did I get that all right?
All right, I think I'm good. I
Take your
think I'm
time.
good.
Take your
No, I'm
time.
just trying to read all my notes, but I can always go back if I have another question.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere. Counselor Tavares, you have?
Sure, yeah. So just a follow-up question on the cannabis host agreement fees. So that 1.7 million that's sort of in limbo at this point, that, pending whatever sort of legal outcome from the state. Is there any sort of contingency at this, or actually, let me back up and ask another question first. Have those funds already been expended in prior years?
Those cases, yes.
Okay, so there's no contingency at this point for those funds, should they have to be returned?
Right, so one of the reasons to bring it up in this conversation is if we have an unprecedented certified free cash and there's this potential liability out there, maybe we want to put it in a reserve in case that comes to fruition, right? Because, and I don't remember off the top of my head everything, but it was the first thing that we did with it was we did the funding for the, I want to say it was the gunshot detection systems.
Yeah.
In the first year, a lot of it went to capital expenses. It is spent. It's spent or committed through a purchase order over time in a budget, right? So I could go back and really tease the number out, but regardless of what we did with it, if it goes back to the amount that was truly collected, that's a fair representation, I believe, of the amount collected over time for the entire program. To clarify, the 3% tax is not what we're talking about. That's on the books, it's continuing, that stuff. This is strictly the impact fee.
Okay. Thank you.
All set?
Thank you.
So, Counselor Tavares, I'll just remind you that that's why we have a stabilization account. So those sudden emergencies, the rainy day fund's there to cover that up. And there is a sunset on the 3%, right? It's a 5-year.
That's true, yeah.
So we're year 2 into this program, so we got 3 years left on the 3%?
It's a rolling 5-year period depending on the license agreement, the host agreement itself. So
we might have 4 years.
or 1 depending on, you know what I mean? And
Depends on the
it
HCA.
depends on each HCA, but I believe the max is 5.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Delacio.
Thank you, Councilor Conti. Deb Mason, thank you for coming down. Thank you for your work on this. A lot of discussion tonight, and especially around the whole about overtaxing. And I think it's important to understand that this isn't overtaxing, it's budgeting. And when you're budgeting, you're trying to solve for variables and circumstances outside of our control. And I think that's really what's important. When we look at, as you mentioned, the 3 biggest departments, the 2 public safety and public works, I think you can never plan on retirements. You can never plan on people leaving the city, which is going to lead to the overtime. So I just think that that's important. And the other thing, Councilor Conti, I think that Deb brought up a really important point, and I don't want it to be missed, is this is probably the 2nd or 3rd year in a row that we thought that other shoe was going to drop. That other shoe will drop at some point, and I think it's incumbent upon this council, when the time comes, to be making suggestions and recommendations to be able to plan for when that happens, when we don't have this robust amount of free cash coming back. And a lot of it was COVID, and I think there's probably still some pieces of residual from COVID that we'll see coming back to this, and I don't want to jump ahead in the story. But I think that, we have an opportunity now where we just went on and we really took care of some needs over the last couple of years, but I think now we're in a different spot than we were. I don't think we need as many vehicles, we don't need as many pieces of equipment, and we're in a pot where we can take some of these turnbacks and make some of the other areas where we need to plan for the future whole.
Any other questions from councilors on expenditures? Then let's move on to revenues. This is the fun part.
Don't want to take the extra steps?
Okay. So. Let's start with, because people typically want to just go to the bottom number, right? So we're gonna start there, because, so the final budget, the final estimated budget numbers for fiscal '23 for 164.9 million. And the final number came in at 168.5, which is $3.5 million over estimates. The biggest variable, the place that things can move, right, is going to be in the local receipt grouping. So the only relevancy really for the FY23 actuals as of 4/28/2023, the very first column on here, is that's what we had for posted revenue when I walked out the door on Friday night, which was the Friday before the budget was presented, right? So I printed how much money do we have just to kind of get a sense of, you know, where could it go with the final numbers for fiscal '24. So that's the only reason that you can see those on here. And I feel compelled to talk a little bit about '24 at some point as well. So the motor vehicle excise number came in obviously significantly higher, right? Came in $851,000 higher than the estimated budget. The fiscal '24 budget is budgeted at $400,000 more than that. So, and Councilor County could probably speak to this more eloquently than I could, but all things being equal, if there's no change in your vehicle status, your income would actually decline because once the depreciation happens, right? So
Only for 5 years.
right, for the 5 years, but all things remaining static, if there was no change in the number of vehicles in the city, no new vehicles, that kind of stuff, I have no idea what's gonna happen with the inventory of vehicles. I mean, for the last couple of years, you couldn't get a vehicle, or the vehicles that you get though are super expensive, right? And now, I don't know what's gonna happen with the UAW, like, so I'm still reasonably comfortable with a $5.8 million estimate. The other thing to know is the certain numbers on your local receipts, estimate to estimate, and that's a, you know, an increase, 5.4 estimate to a 5.8 estimate, regardless of what you got, will impact your municipal revenue growth factor and what the expectation is of what the state says that the city can afford, right? So when you look at some of the estimates, and you're like, okay, how reasonable are we? I've talked to the assessor about that number. We've talked multiple times during the spring and in the fall. We don't know. We think maybe it was last year that I don't know. So I'm here to tell you the estimate that we're using is 5.8. It was dramatically different, but if you also look, right, as of April 28th, the city's revenue in that category was $5.6 million. The final was 6.2. It's not like we had, so the estimate that I used in the budget of 5.8 was higher than what we had known to collect at the time, you know what I mean? So that's where that number is driven from. I'd like to talk to you about meals tax a little bit. I think this is interesting because it was not something that I was aware of until we did additional research throughout the year. I was made aware of it earlier in the year, but it has finalized. During the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, for meals and hotel tax revenue, businesses were allowed to defer that and not pay it. They had to make their final payments and true up, so to speak, before the end of fiscal '23. What the Department of Revenue cannot tell me is how much of the increased revenues under meals and room tax collected in 2023 is actually money that we should have received in '21 or '22.
But what you can see is a spike in the levels between quarterly payments on the room and meals tax that's gone through the roof.
Right, so, but I don't know if one business paid theirs in one particular month. That's my problem, right? I don't know, exactly. It's increased, but I don't know. So in hotel tax, total collection $73,375.
Which is higher than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the 6/30 quarter from FY22 and compare it, I mean, the numbers are consistent. It's the quarter ending. It's Q2, right? And Q3, like the numbers are higher. What the other number that is trending in the wrong way is the cannabis tax. So when the budget was set at the $850,000 of expected revenues, which we got, we exceeded, right? We're at $1,117,000 for the year. But if you looked at the quarter-to-quarter estimate, so like this, the same quarter last year was say 294,000 in '22. The equivalent quarter in '23 is 225. Remember, in fiscal '22, we were the only establishment around. In the fall of calendar '22, which is fiscal '23, marijuana became legal in the state of Rhode Island. Anybody that was coming over the border might still be coming, but not as much. I believe North Attleboro opened something during fiscal '23. Mansfield opened a store during fiscal '23. So, why the estimate? So again, we were high compared to the estimate, but the '24 estimate for cannabis, I put in at $900,000. So I did increase that, right? I thought it was I didn't go over $1 million, but it was a reasonable, what I thought, increase to that number. But some of the meals, room tax, I don't know. I did specifically talk about particularly room tax with the state, and again, in part because of the municipal revenue growth factor, after talking with them, I thought we settled out at 45, and we thought that was a reasonable number. So that's why that estimate is used. Solid waste is a fixed number. So here it makes it look like the number's off. It's the only number that's going the other way. But as you know, you set the solid waste rate equivalent to the actual forecasted expenditures for the program. On June 27th, there was a huge payment as it relates to ambulance fees, right? So what happens is Chief LaChance fills out a report, and depending on your population and who the ambulance runs were for and who is responsible for the bill, there's an adjustment made for the Medicare rates. I want to say Medicare, not Medicaid rates. I might have just messed that up, but that payment this year was bigger than any other payment we've seen. That payment was on the order of $500,000, $300,000 of which goes to the general fund. The other portion went to their revolving fund.
So is that under other charges or services?
Yes,
Yeah, other charges.
yep, that's in that number. That 706, 300 of it is a dramatic increase over previous years. In speaking with the chief, I believe he thinks, or there's some discussion that what's likely to happen is the federal rates for reimbursement on ambulance will adjust, go up a little bit. He doesn't think you'd see it would go up steady over time, and you won't see such a dramatic jump, like one-time payment next year. That's a big number, but 300 of that off the top is likely not something that's gonna happen on an annual basis.
Certainly made it look good of staying in the ambulance business this year.
Yeah. Yep. Rentals, just so everybody's aware, when we did the RFP for the co-locators for the towers, and the lease was settled, if you recall, when Jeremy sent that down last year, the rental income dropped by about $30,000 right off the top. They were gonna pay less money. It's just not as, they didn't want it. The one person that responded is paying, but it's $30,000 less than the year before. Some of them are de minimis amounts, the other departmental revenue. Just to point out, the payment in lieu of tax, the $17,000 amount is a firm number. The final number in 2023 included an additional payment that we should have received in the 2022. We went looking for that because we're like, something didn't look right in our pilot payments.
Which line is the pilot's on?
Up top, sorry, I skipped over it, so it's the 17,000. Oh, thanks, sorry. I'm looking at two different spreadsheets, I apologize. Under payments in lieu and taxes, immediately under the penalties and interest, the final number for
Oh, I
fiscal
got it.
'23,
I got it,
28,000. So fiscal '24, the budgeted number for that is 17,000, which is actually a much firmer number. If we look at some other things to notice, right? Interest income. The interest income was budgeted at 20,000.
Investment income.
I'm sorry, investment income on the spreadsheet, yeah. Investment income was budgeted at $20,000. I increased that budget in fiscal '24 to $50,000. The actual amount received is $850,000.
Explain that.
Think about interest income. From a year ago, interest rates were nothing. You can get a CD for 5%. So right now, the treasurer had, or throughout 2023, there was some cash on hand, and she was able to get some phenomenal interest rates on it, and continues to do so.
Considerable amount of cash on hand.
Pardon me?
Considerable amount of cash on hand for
Yeah.
an $850,000.
Some of it's gonna go away, right? Some of it's gonna go away. We have the renewal of the band for the high school. So some of that's a timing, right? So that's not all of it, believe me. There's, in order to get that kind of money, you have lots and lots of other things that go into it. But, last year alone, when you had in 2022, and you had a $9 million certification of free cash, right? At the end, that's $9 million on hand, so to speak, that you can invest. Now, remember, I said the Department of Revenue did about $680,000 of deducts on that. So you had $10 million, right? The money's moving constantly. And when you used to get less than 1%, and now you can get 5% in a CD, we're paying for it on the other side, right? We're paying for it when we borrow too. We used to be able to get money for less than 2%, and now it's 5%. So it looks great until you're paying for it on the other side on the budget. And they'll renew the ban for the high school because revenues have come in through the process, the MSBA process, and you do the drawdowns and so on and so forth. So the renewal on that will drop from 19 million to 7 million. So, again, right, today she might have the money for 30 days able to invest in something, but come November when that renewal happens, that's gone. But it's a big number. Pardon?
State aid dropped.
Yeah, state aid is the other side of the conversation that we had on, the state aid is the other side of the conversation that we had on the assessments, right? So on the charter school, they charge us on the charter school, but they also have the revenue side on the state aid as well, and they didn't give us as much money. That's why the net amount for that is about 594,000, not 985 to the
Oh, I
schools.
see it.
Right?
Oh, I
So
see.
because, and again, it's very unusual to see such a large number on the state aid that's a negative. It's usually much closer. So that's the other side of that equation. Miscellaneous non-recurring. Miscellaneous non-recurring is not something we expect to receive every year. That is the 413. That is the opioid payment that we received in the first year. And that was on the other side, it was in the reserve. That was 150 of it is used for the FY24 budget. And the balance of that was there's a one-time rebate related to the train project, right? So according to bond counsel, that money is general fund revenue, one-time general fund revenue. So that's not going to happen again next year. The Medicaid reimbursement figure of $697,000, which is over the 330, the estimate was 330. We collected the 697. That number is the number that we have an agreement with the school that the school will get their 50% share back at net of the expenses. So that would be on the order of 376,000 and change that would go back to the school. That number in some of the literature that comes with the explanation of what the number is from the federal government still includes pandemic money. Additional
what?
money related to the COVID relief and stuff. So I don't know how long that number is going to stay as high as it is.
Rick,
So we're still getting some of that.
just
Councilor Deluzio.
area of clarification, when you talk train, we're not talking about the MBTA.
Oh, I apologize,
project,
yes,
right? With
train is,
TRANE.
yes, the HVAC project.
Okay. Thank you, Deb.
Questions? Council Dolan, you have the floor.
Thank you. Quick question. On the deducts, is there any way to estimate that, or
We're,
the 680,000 that you were talking about?
Talking about the
Not
school?
allowable for certain, you know, that we can't use from certain accounts, like when the DOR reviews everything?
So the deducts, okay, let me explain what those are, because, so, again, the general fund is responsible for everything,
Yeah.
right? So what happens, you have a federal grant at the school, and the federal grant is awarded to the school department for, let's say, it's $1 million. Let's say it's $1.2 million, and the expectation is they spend $100,000 a month, every month, even though school is only 10 months. We're just gonna use this in my example. At the end of the year, if they've spent, the year being the fiscal year, if they've spent money, I obviously have to accrue the revenue that's due. If that revenue is not received by the city on or before September 30th, related to that, it's an automatic deduct for free cash. So one of the reasons, right, sometimes people are curious about why does it take so long for free cash? Depending on how big those deducts are, you're not gonna submit until you absolutely have to, because you want that revenue to come in to the city. So that revenue that's throughout all the funds in the entire city, which are grants, revolving funds, all types of special revenue funds, the total amount booked that potentially could be deducted if it wasn't received is $2.3 million.
Okay.
So the 680 last year were things that hadn't come in by, and it literally a day matters, right? If it's not here and I can't prove that it's here by September 30th and it came in on October 1st, it doesn't count. You'd have to go back for a recertification, and you, honestly, you're not gonna go back if you have $9 million. You're gonna go back when you have 7,000. Because what's gonna happen, so that $600,000, it's gonna flow through into the next year. It's part of your equity that they look at. They start with actual fund balance. This discussion is sort of, you know, this is sort of what happens, you know what I mean? You can kind of get a good idea of around what the number would be when you had X number of dollars left over from last year, and your revenues outpaced your expenses, and, you know, we ended up net. I think you guys are, you're hearing there's going to be, unless I messed something up completely, which is within the realm of possibility, we're gonna have a substantial number for free cash. And then, I know the administration, and again, Mason will speak to that if you want to go for a little bit and talk about some of the things he probably already highlighted on, but certainly you speak for the administration, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, obviously, this has been Deb's, the auditor's show. I mean, she's done a great service to the community, putting this budget together, you know, along with the administration. I obviously wasn't here for that. And I appreciate the auditor's efforts to kind of bring me up to speed on this process, you know, over the last few months. And she, you know, continues to be a great resource, and you know, allowing me to be here tonight with her. The administration just wanted to let the council know that we fully intend to satisfy some of the commitments that was in the budget message. So in regards to making those contributions to the special education stabilization, you know, our stabilization fund, as well as the other component we've talked about with compensated absence, adding some additional funds there. We've been in consultation with the school. We talked about that around 600,000. That we, you know, to your point, Councilor Kobus, you had said, looks like it may be a one time. And so, are we setting a precedent if we allocate this to the school immediately, or can we set it aside as a stabilization for, you know, the time where it goes in reverse? So that's something we're looking at right now. You know, again, this budget was put together. I think, you know, the auditor's spoken to this. It was put together with conservative estimates of, you know, revenues and expenditures in sort of a time of uncertainty, and waiting for that shoe to drop, as we've talked about. And, you know, there are still pending interest rate hikes ahead. I mean, I think we can all say it's still sort of an uncertain time. So it you know, we believe it still remains, you know, sort of critical to maintain healthy balances in these funds. One of the other components that I believe is before you tonight was the excess new growth. So we had sent down a communication on that. This is a further commitment by the administration that, hey, half the excess new growth would go to the school, and then from the city's share of that, the half of the excess new growth, we would shore up for the per pupil expenditure. So that's something that has come down before you as well. And yeah, I mean, again, we're just going to continue to work with the school department. The One City, One Budget meetings have been fantastic. We've kind of been able to have open discourse, and the auditors basically given this presentation already to the administration and the administration on the school side, and so it's allowing us to plan and work together. So we're looking forward to kind of continuing that. If there's any other questions, for the administrators.
Questions from councilors? Councilor Delicio, you have the floor.
Thank you. So Mason, first of all, thanks for coming down again. Appreciate everything you said about what the administration's plans are. Second time we heard about the one budget, one city, one budget. I guess my ask and my request would be for council representation on that as well, where we have one of the biggest functions that we do as a body is passing that budget. So perhaps Councilor Conti or someone from the chair, if we could have some representation on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe, Councilor, I believe you were extended an invite to the One
I
City.
was, and I had to decline.
Yes, so, I mean, if there's someone, I think you had offered up, if there was someone who wanted to be there in lieu of you being there. I don't know if we had a volunteer for that, so we certainly.
We were asked. I don't think we were asked, but certainly either one of us could go if we knew it was happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the administration would look forward to that. Again, that invite was extended. We can talk about, who would like to be the representative.
Great. Thank you for that. I
The reason
appreciate
for
it.
that was I didn't feel it was my position to appoint someone else. It was a direct invitation from the mayor, so
Makes sense. Sure, I get that.
it was her choice, not mine.
So again, I can speak to the mayor, and we can, so if it sounds like there's two names in the bucket, so we can have that conversation.
So, any other questions from the councils? We'll expect to see you back late in October for the supplemental budget.
We don't have anything other than what's already before you.
Was that?
It's already, the two items that Mason spoke about, there's nothing additional that I'm aware of that's coming down from the administration.
Okay.
I would like to share that I have a call into the Department of Revenue. In this year's budget, there's a couple of new things, right? The premium on bonds to reduce the amount of the debt exclusion. I have a call into DOR to make sure that it's being properly presented on the recap. If they have any concerns and I need to amend anything that has already gone through the council, I'll be back here with bells on to let you know. But I can't think of anything else. The supplementals, the 3 supplemental appropriations just came down as it relates to growth and the changes on the assessments. It was in the special communication of the 19th, I believe.
Okay, we'll be discussing those later on tonight.
Okay.
Councilor Wyman, you have?
Yes, thank you. When does the state aid become, when do we become aware of what the state aid is?
So as part of the budget process, we get the estimated numbers. So the cherry sheet, the final cherry sheet, I think was just done on August 9th of 2023. So we used an estimate at the time of the budget. I think we used House Ways and Means. And the final governor's budget came out in August, and then subsequent to that, that's why we have the adjustment to the assessments and the cherry sheet numbers that came down on September 19th. I mean, I feel compelled to say, one of the reasons that we're so early in the game is twofold. One, the chief assessor did a phenomenal job. She already got growth certified. It's the earliest growth has ever been certified in the I can't even remember it being certified this early, which is important. And the city's going through a major computer upgrade October 26th and 27th. So our whole schedule is built around when that happens, and we're gonna have some changes. So the final number this year, which is later, I think when you have a new governor, there's some provision that provides for it to be submitted slightly later than it was in the Baker administration, because he was year over year. So the final numbers just came out August 9th. And then what happens is the state, depending on the category and the classification, most of them are 1/12. You get the distribution 1/12, you get the expense 1/12. In some instances, it's a different payment methodology, it might be quarterly, it might be semi-annually for certain things, but the big numbers, like chapter 70 is 112. And that's important today. It wasn't always like that. Years ago, it was the last day of the quarter, but from a purely cash flow perspective, the methodology that the state uses today is substantially better. I have not seen any news today, so I don't know the status of the federal government shutdown and what impact, if any, it would have on the city. I did have a conversation with the city treasurer today in anticipation of this meeting, simply to ask, if there was a shutdown, which may or may not affect federal grant revenues that we get, right, for the school. To your point, like about the 680,000, right? Some of that was federal grant revenue that we didn't receive, so that there was the deduct. We ultimately got the money, so it's just a matter of timing, right? So I don't want anybody to be concerned about that. Our cash flow position right now does not lend itself to concern if there was a shutdown for a short period of time. We could weather that.
Thank you.
Well, I hope my fingers crossed on the Munis upgrade.
Thank you. Mine too.
Yeah, because that could be potentially disruptive.
Yeah.
And we will be applauding the chief assessor when she appears in front of us, because I particularly am delighted that she has moved the schedule up.
It's a really big deal.
It is. It's a very big deal.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough appreciation.
It's a particularly big deal to the people who are in the position.
Yeah, it's a really, really big deal. There's two spreadsheets that we didn't go over, but and I'm happy to hand them out if anybody's interested. They are basically the same thing for FY '23 summary on expenses, but just gives you the '24 summary year to date. And a little summary of the revenues of, what the final number was for '23, unaudited, the final estimate, the final unaudited number. And I say unaudited because there's an institution that comes out and makes sure that I do what I'm supposed to do the right way.
Let's
So,
circulate.
I'm gonna just give it to you.
Let's circulate that to all the counselors, and we'll contact you if we have questions.
Perfect. And sorry I took so long.
Thank you for coming, both
Thank
of you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Very excused. So, councilors, I have, in the committee, I have 6 or 7 motions to bring before you this evening. Starting from the docket of October 3rd, 2023. I think I gotta hold that. That's got a public hearing on October 3rd, so we'll hold that. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to rescind the appropriation of $5,671,595 to account number 198011000, state aid and county charges intergovernmental, which was council vote number 7 of June 6, 2023, and replace it with the following: $5,871,782 to account 1980100, state and county charges intergovernmental.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Cobus. This lower figure is part of the reason why we have the numbers that we just discussed. It's nice to see the state county charges lowering rather than increasing. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Seeing none, the motion's in order. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to approve the following supplemental appropriation: $95,557 to account A 4220070-551070, School Department, Maintenance of Buildings, Non-Educational Supplies, School.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Cobus. Ordinarily, I would be questioning how the 95,000 is going to be expended, but it's my understanding that Mr. Furtado wishes to purchase filters for the air conditioning systems and then put the balance of this into an account for future preventive maintenance expenditures in the school department. So that's my understanding, and if I discover that it's different, I will, of course, bring that up. But I would recommend the passage of this motion. Are there any questions and comments? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to approve the following supplemental appropriation. $127,726 to account A4220070-551070 School Department Maintenance of Buildings, Non-Educational Supplies School.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Cobus. This is a result of the free cash that was certified by the state that was not expected. A very quick explanation. Every year, the levy is set, and every year, new things happen in the city, such as you build an addition, or someone builds a new house. Anything that is new construction is considered new growth, and the taxes that are charged to that new growth get added on top of the levy for the following year. So we budget each year, Julie Hobson, our assessor each year, budgeted based on what the average for the last 3 years, what the new growth is going to be for the following year, and that's how we operate our budget during the course of the year of how much new growth we're going to get. It's a delightful thing when the economy is strong and we wind up with more growth than is expected, because then this happens. We have money that we can expend into special appropriations to build accounts because it was not anticipated, it was not forecasted, and it was not expected. Does anyone have any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes unanimously. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, please approve the following supplemental appropriation, $32,169 to account 1124-1000-578-300, citywide reserve fund for transfer.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Cobus. Again, this is coming from the same surplus surplus growth dollars being divided between the school and the city. Any questions, comments on the motion? Hearing none, the motion's in order. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes unanimously. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to authorize the school department to pay the following previous year's school bills totaling $7,262.04 as identified in Mr. Furtado's communication, whereby these figures are the City of Attleboro for $2,492.58, the Blick Art Materials, $14.07, H.L. Bloom for $842 and $1,980, Canon Services for $110.48, Collins Sports, $180.51, Jane Conard, $517.41, Learnwell, $680, Yvonne Medeiros, $395, and Susan Shirk, $49.99.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Cobus. Mr. Furtado explains that the invoices did not come in time to be included in last year's budget, therefore they're in front of us to be paid. The monies come out of the school budget. Are there any questions on the motion? Hearing none, the motion's in order. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes unanimously. And finally, from the docket of September 19th, I cannot do that because I have a public hearing on October 17th. So that concludes the business I have to bring before the committee. Does anyone have any other matters to bring before the committee? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion to dismiss.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's in order. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. I declare the Finance Committee adjourned at 7:48. Thank you.
I would like to call City Property and Claims Committee to order at 7:48. And I have one guest this evening who I'd like to have an opportunity to speak because one of the matters is coming up for discussion. So, Kate, if you would.
How's everybody doing tonight? Voted out all those big votes. I'm glad you did, because you know I have to work with that recap with Deb and Julie, so thanks. So I'm here tonight because you have before you in the committee a request from the mayor for some provisions here at City Hall. And one of them is really important to the clerk's office because A year and a half ago, when I took over this position, the first thing I said to the girls in the office was, I'm not going to be a bull in a china shop and just start changing things around. But one thing that I quickly found out, being on the first floor, we're the first window that most people stop at when they come into City Hall. And I had a conversation with the former mayor one day, and we talked about putting a full glass window panel up in front of our window. Right now, if you've been by, we have the two little plastic clips that hang down this half plastic window shield it is. And that was basically put up in 2020 to protect us from saliva, basically, bacteria, germs, things like that. It wasn't to protect us in the office itself. Being on the first floor, and predominantly filled with women on the first floor, we do get many people, some who are angry, some who are irate, some are dangerous, some are very confused, and they're not sure, where they're at. In fact, a few weeks ago, we had a gentleman come in, and he thought he was at the doctor's office. And then he came back in, and he wanted to know if it was a hospital. So, of course, we called over to the police to do a well-being check. And the police officer found him outside, and they got him to the hospital. And the police officer was kind enough to come back and let us know that he was well taken care of. Other times, we have the irate people that come in. And most of those irate people have just gotten a parking ticket because they parked over the line. However it is, the parking enforcement officer's given them a ticket. When I say they're irate, the language that they use, the way that they speak to the girls in the office is unacceptable. And you get a little intimidated by it. I come out of my office to try and calm people down. We don't have a parking clerk here in City Hall any longer. She was removed by the former mayor and sent over to the Department of Public Works over on Lamb Street, so she doesn't have to deal with the public. So now us on the first floor deal with all the irate people, and they're not happy. It just happened just this morning. We actually had 2 different people come in, and one of them was a woman. And the language she was using, I was just astonished by. So we try and calm them down, and then one of us has to leave whatever we're doing at our desk, our jobs in the clerk's office, and go and escort them over and explain to them how they can fill out an appeal, what they can do, or who they can call. But it takes a little bit of time. But we've also had some people that might have escalated in the past and that are known to the police. And we actually have pictures of them on the wall in our offices. And the mayor, DeSimone, when she first came in March, we had a conversation, and she brought in Chief Hegney, and he perused all of City Hall and told her what needed to be taken care of so that we would be safer. So she immediately had panic buttons installed. Well, the panic button, if someone were to come through the shield that's in our office, like if they could jump through it, they can reach underneath, they can grab us. But if they were to just come flying through that panel, nobody would be able to get to the panic button. They'd be on top of us, So it is for a safety reason that I really want to sell this window, and it's going to be the whole first floor. Bill McDonough came in, measured, and his department is going to help us so that my counter will become ADA compliant, because right now it's not, and you can't see through that plastic if someone is in a wheelchair, and that happened not that long ago, and I couldn't see the gentleman. You could just hear his voice come. So we wanted to just kind of make it more comfortable for the residents who come in here. Also, if you look around, it's kind of messy looking, it's old, it's antiquated. So I like the idea of her just freshening it up, making it a little bit more appeasing to the eye, because it is the residents who are paying for this. And I think it will help in the long run. People feel more comfortable when they do come in. Maybe it'll soothe them, I don't know. But I would seriously appreciate it if you would approve the glass windows to protect us all.
Thank you. Kate, any questions, concerns?
Thank you. Madam Clerk, thank you for coming down and talking about this. I think this is really important on several levels. The most important is, you're right, the election shields, they're not there for safety. And I think the fundamental function we have is keeping the city workers safe. And in this case, now personally, in my previous professional role, I had someone, when I was managing a bank, jump over a counter. In my current role, I've had someone jump over a counter. I think that, as you said, people are irate right now, and you have to tell them no a lot. People aren't accustomed to hearing no. So I'm gladly supporting this, and I understand really the importance of this project and from a safety perspective. So thank you for coming down and advocating for it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Anyone else? Councilor
I knew
Carpenter?
it.
Being a city hall worker, I can totally relate to what you're going through. In the COVID, when COVID first hit, I was a ferocious tiger to get the full plate window in the city of Taunton, and it was not pretty. I'm happy that the mayor is looking at the whole thing and getting everything done, because it's past due, totally past due. Go into any other city hall around here, and it's already done. We're behind the times. So you have my full support, and I know what you're up against.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that so much. Appreciate it. Awesome.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, Kate, thank you so much for coming in. I
Thank
appreciate
you for
it.
letting me speak.
Okay.
All right, see you next week.
Okay. So with that, from the docket of October 3rd, 2023, and this is the motion that our city clerk, Kate Jackson, was just speaking on, I entertain a motion to transfer $14,396.50 from account 1124100-578-300 citywide reserve fund for transfer to the following accounts: $8,296 to account 1124100-524-011 citywide building maintenance; $3,600 to account 1124100-530-346 citywide plumbing services, and $2,500.50 to account 1124100-543-010 citywide supplies building maintenance.
Second.
Thank you. Again, I fully support it. I think it was great that Kate came down and talked a little bit about it. She also would like to see things spruced up, but I think the major issue here is the safety of the offices. Any questions, concerns?
I just want to say, I think it's absolutely necessary.
Yes, agreed. Okay, any others? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to declare the following police vehicle as surplus and available for disposition, for trade-in, or to sell. It's a 2014 Chevy Impala. The VIN number is 2G1WA5E3-5E1104074. There are 133,436 miles, and it is in very poor condition.
Second.
Thank you. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Any other questions or concerns? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to declare the following treasurer's office furniture as surplus and available for disposition. One filing cabinet, 3-drawer with slide out. It's a 22 by 18 by 31. It's in fair condition. It needs paint, and the value is $50. One desk with 2 drawers, 24 by 48 by 29 and a half. It is in good condition, value $150. One desk, drawers, no key, 30 by 60 by 29, good condition, value is $250.
Second.
Any concerns, questions about this? No. Okay. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to declare the following water department as surplus and available for disposition. 200 water meters. They are used, and a 1984 CAT 950 front-end loader, serial number 22Z01744, in poor condition.
Second.
Thank you. Again, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Any questions, concerns? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. So that is all the business, city, property, and claims has this evening, and I would like to call for an adjournment.
Second.
Thanks, Mayor. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 7:59.
The License Committee has no business this evening. We'll meet at the next appropriate time.
I'd like to call Public Works to order at 7:59. I have three motions this evening from the docket of October 3rd, 2023. I entertain a motion to transfer $26,460 from account 6000-578300 wastewater enterprise fund reserve fund for transfer to account 6000-530180 water enterprise fund safety study to provide the required safety, health, and compliance training. So this is basically the same as, we did for the DPW to be in compliance with the Massachusetts Department of Labor and Standards and OSHA. Does anybody have any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to transfer $2,450 from account 1124100 578300 Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account 1124100 542020 Citywide Supplies Office Equipment to replenish money used for the purchase of sandbags.
Second.
Thank you. So as everybody, I'm sure, remembers, the sandbags that we allowed residents to come down and fill and take with them during the monsoons. So this is just to replenish that. Does anybody have any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. This next one, if you remember the mower that we ordered way back when for recreation, and we needed to allocate more money. We had a little piece missing at the end of the motion for the last time. So it was from the docket of September 19, 2023. I entertain a motion to authorize the use of funding from the Recreation Revolving Funds to complete the purchase of a John Deere 1570 terrain cut mower with Petco collection system. This item was requested and voted by the council on December 2021.
Second.
So we had allocated the money, we just didn't have this little blurb in there, so that way if anything changes in the price, that they can use it from the recreation fund. So that's why we're doing this tonight. Does anybody have any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. That's all I have for the Public Works Committee. I'd like to call for an adjournment at 8:02.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'd like to call Transportation and Traffic Committee to order at 8:02. Present this evening are Councilors Dolan and Tavares. I have two motions for this evening and updates regarding the Traffic Study Commission. I entertain a motion to strike the following. From the docket of February 7th, 2023, request study and recommendation for no parking from Orange Street to Brownell Street on Parker, westerly side.
Second.
Thank you. This item was referred to Traffic Study Commission. They've looked at it. They spent some time back in June before they paused for the summer. And my understanding is that Lieutenant Miller, who's the representative from Attleboro Police Department to the traffic study, also made several rounds at different times of day. And so there were a couple of site visits and folks took a ride over there to try to assess what the problem was. Our understanding as it came down for the traffic study to look at was that there was parking on both sides and it was creating a sort of a narrow roadway where it may be difficult for emergency vehicles to get through, and in particular to get like a fire engine, something large down the street heading toward the school. From what they could see and from what we were able to assess, different times of day, different days of the week, we really couldn't see that issue illustrated. So it seemed that most of the folks were parking generally on one side, but even when there was parking on both sides, they were staggered enough that it didn't seem to be a problem. I also believe some of the members of the traffic study had spoken to neighbors as well, and they had discussed, hey, do you see any problems with this? And really no issues had come up. So their recommendation was not to do anything at this time, but for the council to kind of monitor this, and if we continue to get complaints, maybe it'll help us better assess what exactly is happening on that road, and maybe to collect some additional detail to help them scope the problem. So at this time, the recommendation is that we strike it from the docket. Are there any other questions or comments?
Kelly,
Yes.
just a comment. I know I brought that in, and Laura signed on it. It actually was a motion just in case there was an emergency. I know when they went down, cars weren't necessarily parked opposite each other, but it's happened in the past, and one of the neighbors came to me with that, and I talked to Laura about it, and it would be a shame if there was an emergency and there happened to be a car parked opposite each other on that side of the road, and you couldn't get a large fire truck through, for instance. So it's a motion to err on the side of caution. It wasn't a motion to hurt anybody over there. And the landlords, as I said earlier, there's room behind those units that if they took a few bucks out of their pocket, they could get off-street parking. So I still think it's a good idea. I thank you for you looking into it, but I wish I'd have known it. I would have explained it a little different to the police department and whatnot.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. I entertain a motion to strike the following from the docket of December 6th, 2022. Referred the following to Traffic Study Commission and the Traffic and Transportation Committee to look into multi-way stop signs at the intersection of Dennis at Eldridge Street.
Oh, second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. So this item is also referred to Traffic Study Commission, and I spent some time talking with DPW about this as well. We were looking at sort of why this need emerged, and really what it came down to was several residents just past this intersection and just before this intersection were complaining about speeds in particular, coming off of County Street onto Dennis Street. So at times when there isn't heavy volume, it's very easy to get some speed up on County and just make that sort of slight left onto Dennis. And what was happening is residents were pulling out of their driveway in this area, and these cars were coming quite quick, and they were afraid it was going to cause an accident. They raised to me the concerns about, well, we get a lot of pedestrians from the park, a lot of residents in the area that are walking their dogs, and with the park entrance right there and sort of Eldridge right there, really it makes sense to have some kind of signage. When we looked at it, the concern that came up from traffic study was if we put a stop sign on Dennis, it had the potential to back up traffic to County. So at those busier times of day, there was a real concern about that happening. And if you've driven through County Square, you know that area is already pretty challenging, particularly at train times, commuter times, coming from downtown heading toward 95. So the recommendation was that we don't sign it, but they did look at alternatives. One of the alternatives that we successfully now completed is DPW had put up one of those lighted speed signs just off of County Street onto Dennis, so it's on Dennis Street, but it will light up. So if you are hitting that intersection at a high rate of speed, it will light up and tell you what your speed is to remind drivers, slow down, this is a residential area. Since that sign went in, I haven't received any other calls. Haven't heard from the residents, and these were residents who had called a few times and had spoken to me over the course of a few months, and it's been quiet. So my assumption is that it's resolved their immediate concerns. But like anything else, I would recommend the council keep an eye on this area in particular. Now that the new high school is open, we are seeing some high school traffic coming down that road as well. Going to the school and coming out of Rathbone Willard Drive. So it's possible that speeds along this roadway may come up as an issue again. But at this time, the recommendation from traffic study is that we move ahead with striking this item. Are there any questions or concerns? Yes, Councilor Conti.
So I'm pleased that the Traffic and Transportation Committee understands that the stop sign is not the way to alleviate this issue, because that would be a big mistake. That's why we have a traffic control unit. The question I have is, does the police department still have the request for service form for residents to fill out for police action in their neighborhood?
I don't know about a form, but I have spoken to several residents who have called to complain about speed issues, and I've referred them to the Attleboro Police. My understanding is that they're taking the information over the phone, and then they're sending someone from the traffic unit out to assess. Oftentimes, I know Lieutenant Miller himself has gone out and spoken with the residents, and then has sent a patrolman out to sit and sort of assess the situation. We try to collect information like the times of day that they're noticing the problems, if there's a trend, and try to align the patrol to that time frame. So that so far has been successful. With the new traffic unit being stood up, we're seeing a difference and definitely a reduction in complaints at least on my end.
That's great. That's exactly the way the system's supposed to work. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. I entertain a motion I move to, oops, I'm sorry, my watch is not working here. Thank you. Move to adjourn at 8:10.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.
The IT and Infrastructure Committee is canceled tonight, but I'm going to call for a committee meeting at 6:45 next Tuesday to read out the one item that we have.
Zoning and Land Use Committee is canceled this evening. We'll call for a committee meeting at next appropriate time.
Call Personnel, Veterans, and Human Services Committee to order at 8:11. Council is present. Council Waterman, Council Blair. For the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to approve the expending of the following grant and any grant amendments regarding the receipt of a grant from Bristol Elder Services in the amount of $7,514 to the COA.
Second.
Thank you. This one and the next one is, they will be kind of tied together.
You want me to read these?
Sorry, I just needed just a bit of water and I'll be okay, sorry. All right, so these grants are gonna be for, Council on Aging, to help with, Minded Body, helping with computer services, for the Council on Aging, and I think this is a pretty good thing. Any questions?
No, I just want to congratulate the Council on Aging for working so hard to get grants.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, entertain a motion to transfer $1,326 from 1124100-578300 Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account 1124100-599-200 Citywide transfer to grant and further transfer $1,326 to account 233-7N4-499700 Bristol Elder Council on Aging, Mind and Body.
Second.
Thank you. So again, this is going to help for exercise classes to help people with walking, get their joints moving, and all that other stuff. Any other questions?
No.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. For the docket of September 19th, 2023, entertain a motion to approve the appointment of John Camara, 562 South Main Street, as an associate member of the Zoning Board of Appeals to fill an unexpired term to expire February 2024.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Blair. We had John in, and I think he's obviously very well qualified. He spoke really well. He's done a lot for the city over the years, and I urge this to be passed by all councilors.
I'm glad to see him come forward because he served on so many committees and he's done well on all of them. He's truly an advocate for the city and volunteering for the many commissions and committees he's been on. So it's good to see a quality person come down.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. That's it for Personnel, Veterans, Human Services Committee. I call for adjournment at 8:14.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We are adjourned at 8:14.
Ordinances, elections, and legislative matters is canceled for this evening.
Save the best for last, I guess. I'd like to call Public Safety Emergency Management to order at 8:15. I have a few motions this evening. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to approve expending of such funds and any future grant amendments regarding $50,000 public safety best practices grant from the state, which will be used for the police department to establish a complaint active shooter hostile event response protocols for the police department and the fire department and EMS department, and to hold regularly scheduled integrated training sessions.
Second.
I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, we've got to have these people up to speed. You know, we've been fortunate not to have an event, but in case of event, best to be prepared. And this gives us the ability to be prepared. Richard?
So I just want to point out to the public that you misspoke one word. It's not a complaint active shooter, it's a compliant active
Compliant.
shooter. There's a
Well-
bit of a difference.
No.
Now, this is a very good program.
Yeah.
Where I work, we've gone through active shooter training, the entire city hall, which
Yeah.
I would love to see here. And it's a very, very, very serious and scary situation.
Oh, it
So I
must be.
fully support this 100%.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Kelly?
Thank you. We've seen, unfortunately, in other communities around the country that, you know, you can have your sort of best intentions, but when one of these things happen, if your folks don't know how to respond, they haven't trained in a situation where they know their ways around the school, they know the ways in and out, and they're not familiar with the layout, or maybe they've never been in a situation like that, so they freeze. This type of training is so imperative and so important for those police officers, those first responders, to understand and know how to react and have that muscle memory to be able to react. And we see the same type of training in the military where we try to train our folks to respond in sort of real life situations. We train the way you're going to fight. It's the same thing for the police. So for them to get exposure, to have the funding, to be able to hold this training, to develop these best practices is really, really critically important to the success of achieving safety in our schools.
We're very fortunate to have Kyle over there, the police chief, with his knowledge and background to bring this training forward. I mean, he's a proponent of training anyway, and this is a prime example of what we need to be doing for the safety of the people involved and the community as a whole. Yes, President, please.
Thank you, Council Blair. Yeah, so to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, I had the opportunity to go through active shooter training at the old Attleboro High School several years ago. Nothing is more harrowing, and it's a drill, but it felt real. And being in that building, in classrooms, hearing gunshots and seeing the responses and just seeing what goes into the coordination of it. It's not something that is necessarily instinctual. It's something that you have to do. You have to plan for every, it's a way of planning for the unplanned. And really to have this important training paid for through grant money, it's a pretty unique and special situation we're in right now.
And as I said, we're lucky we have the personnel that can implement this training. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to approve expending of such grants and any future grant amendments regarding the anticipated receipt of $119,000 in funding via the Department of Mental Health, Massachusetts Jail Assist Division, Single Department Grant Program.
Second.
Okay, this is going to allow us to engage some help under Chief Hegde to get a mental health person. I'll be able to contact them and bring them in. Mental health is, it's everywhere. It's so much more prevalent than it's ever been. So going back to the last motion, if you don't prepare for something and have people in place, you're opening up yourself for a bad situation. And these grants are unbelievable. You know, we're lucky to get them. We do an awful lot of grants, and we wouldn't have programs if we didn't have those grants. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to transfer $270 from account 121010000-558208 police supplies to account 1210000-578020 police bills from previous years to pay an FY23 bill.
Second.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I didn't catch this in the backup, but if it's a previous year's bill, best we pay it. Any comments, questions? I can find out what it's for next week if you'd like, but I'm assuming Kyle wouldn't send something over if it wasn't necessary.
It's supplies. Police supplies.
Hey, it does say supplies, right? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, hearing none, motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to approve expending of such funds and any further grant amendments regarding the receipt of the public safety grant from Bristol County Savings Bank in the amount of $25,000. The grant funds will be used to purchase active shooter ballistic vests and ballistic helmets, which will be divided between the police department and the fire department.
Second.
You gotta thank Bristol County Savings Bank. They're always there passing money out to one department or another, recreation, police, fire, very generous. Community bank, I personally support, and that's why we have those community banks. They support the community, so my kudos to them. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. From the docket of October 3rd, 2023, I entertain a motion to make the following transfers totaling $195,000 to satisfy the contract agreement reached between the police union and the city. $60,000 from account 1124100-578350, citywide reserve fund for labor negotiation, to account 1210100-514010, police college credit. $95,000 from account 1124100-578350, citywide reserve fund labor negotiations, to account 1210100-513000, police overtime. $6,000 from account 1124100-578350, citywide reserve fund labor negotiations, to account -515010 police holidays, $17,000 from account 112410000-578350 citywide reserve fund labor negotiations to account 121010000-514030 police longevity, and $17,000 from account 112410000-578350 citywide reserve fund labor negotiations to account 121010000-512050 police salaries detectives.
Second.
These funds are needed to honor the contract that they've negotiated. I spent probably the last half a dozen years or better, and when Mayor Dumas was in office, we were that close to getting the Quinn bill put in. And the following administration made promises over more than once to initiate this. Come budget time, it wasn't there. I probably pestered Mayor DeSimone more than any councilor on any issue. And she agreed, and they negotiated a basic Quinn bill, but only half funding the amounts. Associate degree, 5% of their base salary. Bachelor's degree, 10% of their base salary. And a master's at 12.5. That's halfway there. I'm so happy that we're halfway there. I hope when the next contract comes up, or even before, that the mayor, in order to retain our police department, comes back and brings that up to the level it was when they stopped paying it. It's a great incentive. It gets our police educated in times when you really have to be educated in the law and everything. And it would be so much easier to retain police officers. We've got 6 police officers either left or leaving since May. Lateral transfers. In order to replace those men and get them up to speed, you're talking $500,000. So it's penny wise and pound foolish if you don't have the incentive to retain the guys we've got that are trained and doing a good job, but to attract, be able to be the place you want to go. So I thank Mayor DeSimone and the administration for at least getting this thing started. And I think it's a necessity. I've been stopped on the street a couple times since this contract got negotiated with a thank you. And that was actually great for me because for the last half dozen years, I've lobbied for this. And I've been lied to in front of people from the past administration. So I'm happy for him. I want to thank the mayor for at least coming through this far. And if money comes up and it gets freed up enough that they can support the second half of it, we don't have to wait for another contract to slide it and finish doing it. So I'm thrilled. And gives me a little something on the way out that I accomplished. Just like Richard got his traffic enforcement division, so. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yeah, I got carried away. I guess I could call.
You can talk, you're entitled.
Motion to adjourn.
Huh?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Special Committee on Tax Abatement Review is canceled tonight.
Special Committee on Classification Compensation is canceled tonight. Call for meeting at next appropriate time.
That's all they wrote, friends. Nice job tonight.